Hello, I'm Matt Reardon, and thanks for watching this Wednesday evening West weather update from Nutrien Ag Solutions on March 1st, 2023. This video getting uploaded a little bit later than I would prefer. I had a fly in from New York earlier tonight, and I got in a little bit later, but nonetheless, we have quite a bit of weather to talk about across the western United States. Not only that, but we've had quite a bit of weather to talk about just in the last 5 to 7 days here. This satellite animation I'm showing you from this low pressure system that came into California last week. This was the one where you're talking about those blizzard warnings in Southern California and the Sierra Nevadas as well. I'm showing you this one. We had yet another stalling low pressure system move into California just earlier this week, February 27th and 28th, that brought more rain and snow to the area. I'll play the loop one more time. You can see all this moisture being funneled into Southern and Central California, right over the Los Angeles metro area, peeking through the clouds here in terms of the lights associated with the city there. See all of that moisture and all those clouds being moved into the area. That brought a lot of that rain and a lot of the snowfall to the upper elevations. If I take you over to this tweet from Caltrans District Number 9, I think we saw a lot of videos like this over the last 5 to 7 days. Whiteout conditions, heavy snow falling in some of these upper elevations. We had travel disruptions in some of these mountain passes. If I take you over to UC Berkeley, their snow lab, they do a fantastic job keeping track of some of those measurements in terms of snowfall throughout the water year. And I'm showing you this video not only because it shows the crazy amounts of snow they've had burying some of their outbuildings there, but I highlighted part of their tweet that shows that they're really just 6.5 feet of snow off from their really big wet year in 2016 and 17. Now, 6.5 feet, that is a lot of snowfall, but I think it's a mark we might be able to reach over the next month or two if we get some more of these systems moving in. We'll take a look at that forecast here in just a minute. If I cover just the water situation over the last 5 days, looking at total precip, the big bullseye that stands out to me on this map is all the water we had in Southern California. We do get rainfall this time of year into Southern California typically, but not quite this much. We're talking 10 plus inches of water equivalent, some of the upper elevations here. Now, much of this did fall as snow. We did get rainfall into parts of Los Angeles. We saw coastal flooding there. Some rivers reaching flood stage as well. Moving north into the Central Valley, 2 to 4 inches depending on where you were in parts of the Central Valley just over the last 5 days. And then obviously a lot more snow falling up into parts of the Sierra Nevadas as well. If we look at just that snow situation specifically over the last 5 days, we can see that maximum certainly over the Sierras. Then up through north of there as well, the Klamath Mountains, Oregon, Washington saw another top off of their snowpack. Some of the areas in the Intermountain West as well, maybe not quite as much as I would have preferred in parts of Oregon, eastern Washington, and Idaho. But you can also see that sliver, that maximum down in Southern California, where they saw all those blizzard warnings issued from the National Weather Service. If we take a look back at season snowfall totals, this is looking at snow water equivalent, the percent of normal here as of March 1st. We can see these areas in dark blue. Just to recap, that's where we're 200% of that snow water equivalent for March 1st here. So really running well above average. The story has been similar. We've only added to that in the Sierra Nevadas, Nevada proper, Utah, the upper Colorado River Basin, and northern Arizona. As we extend north from there, I mentioned some of these areas that missed out, eastern Washington, northern Idaho, parts of eastern Oregon, where we do still have room to improve, at least here in early March. If we look at the last 7 days in terms of precipitation anomalies, not a surprise here to see the Central Valley of California with a lot of the rain they received, the Sierra Nevadas, the bullseye there, and then certainly parts of Southern California going off the color bar, really. But there's that deficit I mentioned in the northern Intermountain West, or even parts of western Washington as well, that missed out on some of this moisture that we could have received in a typical system moving through the Pacific Northwest. I'll pick on the Tulare Basin again. Here are some of the precipitation measurements from this water year. Here's our current water year in blue in terms of measured precipitation. And we can see that we're starting to encroach this 2018 to 2019 water year in terms of total precipitation. And we're really only at March 1st, at least compared to 2018 to 2019, which had that whole water year to account for. That was really, I think, our last wet year, at least, certainly in California. And this system, or this story is going to be similar if we go up through different stations throughout the state. But the point really is that we've had such a fast start to this year here on March 1st that we've caught up to 2018, 2019. I think we'll reach that mark very soon here over the next week or two. But we'll get into that in the forecast. We've talked about the reservoir levels before. Those have improved quite a bit just compared to 2022, the same time last year. or even 2021. If we look across the entire state, we can see a lot of these are close to their historical average. We're looking where the blue bar, that is the current level, is approaching this green bar. That's the historical average. And you can see there are a few of these that are below average, but for the most part, our reservoir situation has improved, and we're closer to average across the board, if not exceeding it in some of these locations. And you'd imagine that as we go into some of these warmer spring months here, we start to melt some of that snowpack that's locked away, right, in ice. That water will eventually make its way through the hydrology into some of these reservoirs. Just to give you an example of that, I'm picking on the Pine Flat Reservoir here. If we look at our 2023 lake levels, our reservoir levels here, we're at 861 feet, right here on early March, at the end of February. And if we compare to where we were in 2022, this lime green line, or even 2021, all the way down here, you can see we're starting off at a much higher point than we were the last 2 years. And as we have that predictable snow melt and we increase those reservoirs going into May, June, and July, I think we're starting off at a much better point just as a result of all the rain and the snowfall we've received recently. So if we expect that similar curve here to hold up going into this year, we could be in a good situation, assuming we don't get too much moisture. Speeding us up to present day here, looking at the all hazards map from NOAA, valid as of Wednesday evening here at the recording of this video. Jumping off to me here is the winter storm warnings which have been issued in Arizona and New Mexico. That's that storm system that was impacting Southern California. It's now finally moved off and out of the region as it's exiting Arizona. It has left in its wake a cold front, so it's not a surprise to see some of these cold temperature advisories and warnings out for California. This dark blue color here, freeze warnings all the way from the tip of the North Valley or the Sacramento Valley down through the San Joaquin Valley. And we even have freeze warnings down through Orange County and parts of San Diego County as well for some of the inland areas. If we look at the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow morning in the Central Valley, this is Thursday morning. Let's see, 28 degrees Fahrenheit forecast for Hanford, 5 points at 29, Visalia 29 degrees Fahrenheit, Paso Robles 27 degrees Fahrenheit, and extending in this horseshoe along the elevation through the Grapevine, potentially well below freezing here where we saw all that snowpack from those storm systems. Talked about that snowpack being kind of a feedback mechanism. It keeps those temperatures cooler overnight, so not a surprise to see that there. The good news here is Friday we are warming up those lows a bit, at least as far as the Central Valley is concerned, and Paso Robles along that southern tier as well. I did mention the freeze warnings in Southern California, San Diego County, Orange County, West Riverside County. Seeing some very cold temperatures move into there along the backside of some of these mountain ranges here, potentially into some of these valleys and the foothills here. Frost and freeze potential, at least enough to warrant the freeze warnings out in some of the inland areas here from the National Weather Service. Something to keep in mind just for Thursday morning, going into the morning hours tomorrow. I did want to take you out into the ECMWF. This is the European forecast model here. I'll make this valid as of tonight. There's that storm system that we watched. It's now moving out of the area. There's winter storm warnings in Arizona and New Mexico. That'll be leaving the western region, getting into Thursday. We do have another system behind it, a weaker one moving through Washington, Oregon, bringing some rain, light snowfall there. Not a big snowpack addition to Idaho and some of those northern Intermountain West areas that we talked about. But behind this, as we get into Saturday and Sunday, you'll see yet another stronger low pressure system moving down out of the Northeast Pacific, focusing itself initially on Washington and Oregon, but then by Saturday, early Saturday, moving down the coastline to the point where Saturday PM, now we're seeing rain back into Northern California along the coast, potentially into the Central Valley, or at least the Sacramento Valley, and then rainfall moving into the Sierra Nevadas, Significant snowfall additions there possible, at least as we get into Sunday evening. You'll see a focus of that moisture onto the Sierra Nevadas, expecting more feet of snowfall to what's already been a very bountiful winter up in the Sierra Nevadas. Now, I will say this event here this weekend, Saturday through Sunday, you'll notice, to kind of walk through this, not as much focus on the southern, really half of California. That's good news. We don't need more inclement weather, flooding, mudslides, rock slides, blizzard conditions there. So I think that's good news. But the Sierra Nevadas are getting more snowfall. And it's really at the point now in the water year where it's hard to ask for much more. We've had so much. It's starting to cause problems up in some of the municipalities up there. So I'm not sure we're really at a point where we're asking for more snowfall. At this point, I'd like to see it move more into the northern or upper tier of the Intermountain West, some of the areas of Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Montana that have missed out. Now, we are expecting kind of another lingering low pressure system early next week, but at least right now in some of the models, the ECMWF and the GFS, this one looking a little bit weaker on Monday and Tuesday, but perhaps some more rain to the Pacific Northwest with some snow shots into the interior. But we'll get some more details on that as we head over the next few days here. If you look just at the snowfall additions through March 8th here, so this is over the next 7 days or so, you can see there's those significant additions to the Sierra Nevada, potentially 1 to 2 feet or even more in some of the higher elevations. In the coastal mountains and the Cascades receiving more significant snowfall. But if you look east of there, again, Idaho, eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, or even through the whole Intermountain West as a whole, not as much from this system or two here over the next 7 days. If we look at the temperatures, the trend over the next 7 days, the temperature trend has been consistent with what it's been, unfortunately, really for the past 60 days. It's been cooler in the western half of the United States. That will continue certainly as we go through the next week. That storm system that's going to come through will again bring a cold front through the Central Valley, so those frost and freeze concerns will stick around. But the cold story continues, and it's partially related to that feedback mechanism we talked about. We've had so much snow over Nevada and parts of California and the Intermountain West, at least in that kind of southern tier, that those temperatures are expected to remain colder. I did want to talk about the jet stream situation, at least going into next week a bit. We are seeing something of a signal in the March 10th, March 11th timeframe, so I thought I would just get into it. This one valid here as of Wednesday evening. There's that storm system moving out of Arizona into the central United States. Jet stream ridge over the Pacific Northwest. This trough connected to that low pressure system moving out of the area. As I step this through Thursday into the weekend, you'll see that next strong low pressure system coming out of the Northeast Pacific, out of the Gulf of Alaska, moving in to the Pacific Northwest. That'll be focusing that rain and snowfall initially in Washington and Oregon, but then moving through California as that flow materializes over the state proper. So there's that next system, that flow centered over California, Saturday, Sunday into Monday. That system finally exits. We quiet down a bit in terms of the western United States, but if I walk this all the way out, mentioned March 10th, March 11th. Now we're at that March 10th, March 11th timeframe. This is all the way out into next weekend, so not this weekend. We see this signal here of an extended Pacific jet stream. And by that, I mean a jet stream extended all the way from Okinawa through Hawaii up into California. And it's these extensions of the jet stream that have the potential to moisture source out of the subtropical Pacific and create some of these atmospheric river events that really bring a lot of rainfall and snowfall to California. Now, it feels unnecessary to bring this up after all the snowfall and rainfall we just received, but this sort of setup is more akin to what we saw in early January than what we've seen recently. Now, the semantics there maybe aren't worth going into. What it really means is more rain and snow, which doesn't sound much different from what we've seen recently. But the concern of bringing this up is for something of a warmer atmospheric river type event. The more rainfall versus snowfall increases the chances for flooding, especially if we rain on some snowpack that can melt it faster and cause issues for the watershed. Now, I will say the signal here, as of yet, we are quite a ways out. We're at 220 hours here. We're talking 9 to 10 days out in the forecast. We're not super confident in the jet stream forecast, at least at this time. The signal isn't as strong as it has been in the past, but it is there, and it is something I want to mention because we're keeping an eye on it. This is just the GFS ensemble right now, looking at their forecast out to that kind of March 10th, March 11th timeframe. If I show you the European model to kind of give you another forecast here, we'll take this out to March 10th and March 11th. I'm showing you this one as an example. We do see something of that extension from Japan through California, or through Hawaii, I should say, up through California, but not quite as strong of a signal. Some of the individual model runs, this is an ensemble, some of the individual model runs still trying to break up this jet stream before it reaches California, which would reduce the chance of one of those atmospheric river events repeating itself in mid-March here. So we'll keep an eye on this forecast. I did want to mention it just as a possibility. If you look at the Climate Prediction Center for that March 9th to March 15th timeframe in terms of precipitation anomalies, they have highlighted an area in Central California for above average precipitation. Now, it's not as strong as some of the other areas or in the past few weeks that they've highlighted. So I think it's something of an agreement from what we just saw. There is the potential. It's worth highlighting, but it's not something where we're really moving way into some of the upper echelons in terms of the probability of increased precipitation. Something to keep our eye on over the next few days as we watch some new model data come into the picture. Now, what we might be seeing is the Mad and Julian oscillation, the MJO, transitioning from phase 7 in early March, March 4th and 5th. As we get out to the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th of March, we see a transition from phase 7 to phase 8, moving across the Pacific Ocean, the Mad and Julian oscillation. When this occurs, typically, it can promote an extension of that Pacific jet stream. So it's not necessarily a surprise to see that extension in some of the models we just looked at of the forecast of that jet stream, given that the Mad and Julian oscillation is moving from phase 7 to phase 8. I think that might be the connection there coming out of the tropics. It's something to keep our eye on, certainly. If we look at the ECMWF ensemble precipitation over that week 2 time frame, again, kind of March 10th through March 16th, we don't see a strong signal here. I mentioned how the ECMWF in comparison to the GFS wasn't quite as strong, wasn't quite bona fide as a signal in terms of that extension of the Pacific jet, and we don't see a big bullseye over the central part of California. So there is some disagreement, at least right now, in the models. If I take you over to the ECMWF weeklies, different model sequence here, this one initialized a few days ago versus just today from the ECMWF ensemble, they do have something of an increased precipitation anomaly here over the central part of California. So they're kind of picking up potentially on the extension of that Pacific jet stream. If I take you over to the GEFS, again, this is the GFS ensemble. That was the more strong signal in terms of the extension of that jet. Well, there's that big bullseye again. So there is some competing model forecasts here. It's enough to lower our confidence a bit, but just the potential of yet another one of these atmospheric river events moving over California. At this point, Miracle March becomes something of a problem given how much snowfall we have and the potential, I think, for flooding. At some point, we do have enough water, or we won't take any more if it means we don't have to deal with some of the flooding or some increased snowfall, inclement weather, I think, over the next week or two. So it's kind of a balance we're keeping our eye on as we move into March here. We did get new March outlooks out from the Climate Prediction Center. I wanted to share those quickly. These came out just earlier this week. As far as temperatures, probably not a big surprise to share with you that they're expecting continued cold over the western half of the United States. Kind of a pattern flip here is that they're expecting some of this cold to extend across the upper tier of the whole continental United States. If you remember, we've been cold here, but we've been warm really in the eastern half of the U.S. So it's interesting to see this pattern flip potential, at least for the northern tier of the eastern United States. They are calling for that increased wet signal across the interior Mountain West across March. That includes California. But this could be good news if we get some more rainfall and precipitation again into that upper Intermountain West, an area that hasn't quite seen as much precipitation out of what's been a pretty wet March for the rest of the western United States. As I wrap up the video here, I wanted to take one last look at the La Nina situation out in the Pacific, and I phrase it that way because we may be in the last few weeks of this multi-year La Nina that we've been dealing with. If we look at the current sea surface temperatures valid as of February 28th, we do see those cooler ocean temperatures in the central Pacific Ocean there. Those have been warming up throughout the winter. And if we take a closer look at the trade winds which influence those ocean temperatures over the last few weeks, looking at this Hobmuller diagram here from the ECMWF, the black line here is present day. That's March 1st. But as we go up in this graph, that's going back in time, looking back on February. And we're really focused on this rectangle here over the Pacific Ocean. You'll notice these blue colors here. Those are easterly winds, or stronger trade winds. Those keep La Nina around, or can even strengthen it. But in the back half of February, the situation was a bit more mixed. We saw a mixture of easterly winds and westerly winds. And as we go out into the future, there is a forecast on this diagram. It's below this black line going out into March. You can see those dates over here on the left. You'll notice this red color here. These are westerly wind bursts forecast from the ECMWF across the Central Pacific. These would work to weaken La Nina or warm up those ocean temperatures in the Central Pacific. If this forecast verifies and there's strong agreement that these westerly winds will indeed occur, I think that would spell an end to this La Nina. Those ocean temperatures have already been warming up. They're not very cold as it is. A big westerly wind burst like this in the Central Pacific, I think that would spell the end of this multi-year La Nina event that we've been dealing with. If we look at the IRI modeled forecast of the ENSO situation, that is La Nina versus El Nino, you can see as we go out into February, March, and April, May, La Nina probabilities plummeting. They're almost insignificant as we get into April, May, and June, replaced with ENSO neutral. That's neither a La Nina or an El Nino. But if you look at the right side of this graph, as we get into the end of summer of 23, or even into the year proper, that red bar starts to enter the conversation. Again, that's El Nino. You can see these probabilities, 60 to 65% chance that we're entering an El Nino to close summer of 2023. I think that would be impactful because all else equal in California and other areas out west, we tend to get more moisture, more rainfall in an El Nino water year. In fact, if I take you back earlier in this video to this precipitation example I showed you, here's our current water year. We're running above average, but our last year where we were above average in terms of California for precipitation was 2018 and 2019, our last El Nino year. So if we do enter an El Nino, I think it would increase the chances of following up what was an above average water year with yet another one. Now it's early, and again, these probabilities are only 60 to 65% chance. So I would call that leaning that way, but not a home run by any means. So it's something that we'll be keeping an eye on. We'll be watching those ocean temperatures as we go through the summer, trying to get a clue, a hint, or a signal as to what we might be dealing with for that 23 to 24 water year and winter situation. That is all I have for you all here tonight. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll talk to you next week.